Hello and welcome to another expert interview with Peel Harvey Biosecurity Group. I'm Susie and I'm the Media Officer with PHBG. If you live in Peel Harvey, you're probably familiar with our native black cockatoos, especially Carnabys. They're pretty iconic around here, but unfortunately they are under serious threat from several invasive species, which is why today we are going to talk with Dr. Christine Groom from UWA about what we can do to protect these birds. Dr. Groom, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, I'm Christine Groom. I'm an adjunct research fellow at the University of Western Australia. I guess I would call myself a conservation biologist. And yeah, I have a special interest in Carnaby's cockatoo.
So could you just tell us a little bit about Carnaby's cockatoos? Like what makes them so unique and why are they important to our area?
Well, Carnaby's cockatoo is an endemic species, so it's only found in southwest Western Australia. They're a species which is kind of iconic. Most West Australians will have encountered this species at some point, so they're familiar with it, might feed in their gardens, but they're actually a threatened species, so it's really, really unusual to have a threatened species that is found in a capital city, and one of its main food sources is Banksia woodland, which is a threatened ecological community. So all those kind of things make it unusual. Their numbers are declining, so they're a migratory species, so they breed in inland areas, and of course inland areas in the wheat belt have been largely cleared for agriculture, and then in the non-breeding season they come to the Swan Coastal Plain and pretty much any coastal areas where humans like to be, and so a lot of that area has been cleared for urban development, and so their habitat loss is a major threat to their survival.
Is it that invasive species are threatening the habitat that causes the problem, or are there more direct threats?
Well, there's certain invasive species that are impacting their habitat, and there's other ones which are impacting their breeding. So the ones impacting their habitat would be things like Phytophthora dieback or other plant pathogens. But then there's also the new one, which is the polyphagous shothole borer as well. So dieback is a pathogen which affects a lot of plant species. A lot of the plant species that Carnaby's rely on for food are impacted by Phytophthora, so a lot of the Banksia species, for example. So it's really important to try and reduce the spread of Phytophthora. Ways to do that include, you can use boot cleaning stations, use only established tracks or paths when you're navigating an area or bushwalking. Fencing bushland remnants can help to control access, to limit access. You can source dieback-free materials and plants. So NIASA accredited nurseries are a good place to source plants that don't have hygiene practice in place to minimise the risk of Phytophthora being in the soil coming with those plants. You can also install interpretive signage or map locations where the Phytophthora is in an area to limit access to those places as well. For polyphagous shothole borer, there's a whole bunch of resources that DPIRD have on their website, which you can go there to look up the kind of signs to look for and what are the main reproductive hosts of the borer. Going back to the impacting the breeding areas, there's things that are nest competitors, such as feral bees, but also birds that become locally overabundant, such as corellas and galahs, and also to a lesser extent, but can be a problem at certain times, is predation by feral cats. If you're installing artificial hollows, the design of those artificial hollows can reduce their attractiveness to the feral bees. So having the artificial hollow open at the top can reduce invasion by the feral bees. It's not 100% successful, but it's a really good start compared to nest hollows which have a roof to them. And the cockatoos actually prefer entering a hollow from the top anyway. They naturally nest in stags and things like that in preference, so it's not a problem for them. The problem with feral cats has been specific breeding locations where there's been a feral cat that's discovered that they can prey on chicks or nesting Carnabys.
Is it feral cats specifically, because I know your focus is a little more in the urban area, and where feral cats, I mean, the definition of feral cats is legally a bit problematic, but in urban areas, obviously, you're really talking about roaming pets.
Yes.
So we have the same problem?
In urban areas, the birds are typically very mobile and they're very aware of their surroundings, and so the cats typically aren't a problem. The only situation where there have been a problem is in those nesting hollows where it's a restricted environment and the nestlings are obviously not able to defend themselves.
Right. Are there specific trees that the Carnabys only live in?
There's particular trees that they use for breeding, so they need to nest in tree hollows, and so there's certain species that are better at forming hollows than others. So common ones are things like wandoo and salmon gum, but there's others as well. But there's also trees that they use for foraging. So a lot of the eucalypt species are important foraging, and Crimbia, so Mary trees are also important. But there's also a bunch of exotic trees that are useful for them too. So things like pines, liquid amber, tipuana are also really important.
So you mentioned that Banksia woodlands in particular were important to Carnaby's cockatoos. Could you tell me a little more about that?
Yes, so Banksia woodland, or also proteaceous heathland. So heathland with lots of things like banksias and hakeas are really important food sources for the cockatoos. They provide a lot of food throughout the year. So in comparison to non-native species, like banksia, they can feed on both the nectar from the cones as well as the seeds, and also grubs as well. And then the different banksias flower at different times of year, so it provides that food source throughout the year. Whereas things like pines, they just feed on the seeds at a particular time of year.
So are we planting banksias and the other trees that the birds like to dwell in as part of conservation efforts?
Revegetation efforts or planting for Carnabys involve planting a lot of species, but particularly those from those plant groups. Most revegetation involves native species, but I personally believe that in the urban landscape, because the Carnabys has quite a diverse diet, it opens opportunities to plant things that are not native if that's suited to that particular location and purpose for the planting. So, for example, it might be difficult to establish banksias as street trees, but there's things like tipuana and liquid amber, which are really good as street trees, and they will also provide food sources for Carnaby's cockatoo.
Okay. And is that something that you see as being sort of driven by the individual rather than local governments and shires, or do you think it's going to take everybody?
Definitely everybody. It's a shared responsibility. We can all do our bit to help, but to have the whole landscape scale improvement to the landscape to make more cockatoo friendly, we need all different land managers doing what they can to help. It's actually really empowering that the things we can do for Carnaby's cockatoo we can do in our own gardens. We've got control to help this species. A lot of threatened species, they're not. It's harder for individuals to help them.
So practical actions people can do to help Carnaby's would be making sure that trees they get for their verge are Carnaby cockatoo friendly?
Yes, that they can do that. I guess a caution with planting on streets is that a threat to them is also being hit by vehicles. So planting close to roads is not such a good idea. But having said that, if the roads are quiet suburban streets and the trees are set back as far as possible, and ideally species where the cockatoos feed in the canopy, so things like the liquid amber and the tipuana, the birds typically perch in the tree and feed there, whereas other things, they'll perch there, feed there, and drop things on the ground and then come down to the ground to feed on them there, and then they're at risk of being hit by vehicles then.
What other things can a normal person who's not a scientist do to help protect their Carnaby's cockatoos?
Well, I guess there's all sorts of things like putting a bird bath, providing water is really important. The cockatoos need to drink before roosting at night time and throughout the day as well. You can also join your local Friends of group to look after a local patch of bushland. Joining weeding and planting days, things like that are also good.
What does the future of Carnaby's cockatoo look like over the next decade?
The future is challenging. There's a lot of threats facing them, but I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to help. So I think with the amount of interest in this species at the moment and the kind of the groundswell of lots of people wanting to help, I think there's definitely hoped for a good future for this species.
Thank you. And you recently wrote a book.
I did, yes. My book's on creating black cockatoo friendly suburbs, and it's published through UWA Publishing. It's a handy reference guide for anyone to pick up and get ideas on how they can help this species.
So backyard gardeners, landscapers, everybody? Yes.
I've tried very hard to make the information accessible to a wide audience. So as a scientist, I feel science communication is really, really important. And it's not enough to have publications in scientific journals or a thesis, because that information isn't accessible to the people that want to be able to do something in their garden or their backyard, or even to professional practitioners. They don't have the time to read all that information. They want to know the exact things that they can do to help. And so that's what I've aimed to do in my book, is to filter all that information and put in some practical advice there. It's got lots of pictures and lots of tables and lots of dot points, so the information's really easy to pull out of it.
If people would like to know more specifically about Carnaby's cockatoo, who can they approach?
Well, BirdLife Western Australia has a bunch of really useful resources on their website, so I encourage people to visit there and look for those. If people would like to know more about upcoming events that I might be going to, doing author talks or things like that about my book, my Facebook page is the best place to go for that. It's Christine Groom-author.
Thanks for joining us today. If you'd like to learn more about the invasive species affecting you and how you can control them, visit our website at phbg.org.